2 Maccabees chapter 10. Purification of the temple. Now Maccabeus and his followers, the Lord leading them on, recovered the temple and the city, and they tore down the altars which had been built in the public square by the foreigners, and also destroyed the sacred precincts. They purified the sanctuary and made another altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices after a lapse of 2 years, and they burned incense and lighted lamps and set out the bread of the presence. And when they had done this, they fell prostrate and besought the Lord that they might never again fall into such misfortunes. If they should ever sin, they might be disciplined by him with forbearance and not be handed over to blasphemous or barbarous nations. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place, that is, on the 25th day of the same month, which was Chislev. And they celebrated it for 8 days with rejoicing, in the manner of the Feast of Booths, remembering how not long before, during the Feast of the Booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. Therefore, bearing ivy-withered wands and beautiful branches, and also fronds of palm, they offered hymns of thanksgiving to him who had given success to the purifying of his own holy place. They decreased by public ordinance and vote that the whole nation of the Jews should observe these days every year. Such then was the end of Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes. Accession of Antiochus Eupator. Now we will tell what took place under Antiochus Eupator, who was the son of that ungodly man, and will give a brief summary of the principal calamities of the war. This man, when he succeeded to the kingdom, appointed one, Lysias, to have charge of the government and to be chief governor of Cilicia and Phoenicia. Ptolemy, who was called Macron, took the lead in showing justice to the Jews because of the wrongs that had been done to them. They attempted to maintain peaceful relations with them. As a result, he was accused before Eupator by the king's friends. He heard himself called a traitor at every turn because he had abandoned Cyprus, which Philometor had entrusted to him, and had gone over to Antiochus Epiphanes, unable to command the respect due to his office. He took poison and ended his life. Campaign in Idumea. When Georgius became governor of the region, he maintained a force of mercenaries and at every turn kept on warring against the Jews. Besides this, the Idumeans, who had control of important strongholds, were harassing the Jews. They received those who were banished from Jerusalem and endeavored to keep up the war. But Maccabeus and his men, after making solemn supplication and beseeching God to fight on their side, rushed to the strongholds of the Idumeans. Attacking them vigorously, they gained possession of the places and beat off all who fought among the wall, and slew those whom they encountered, killing no fewer than 20,000. When no less than 9,000 took refuge in two very strong towers, well equipped to withstand a siege, Maccabeus left Simon and Joseph, and also Zacchaeus and his men, a force sufficient to besiege them. And he himself set off for places where he was more urgently needed. But the man with Simon, who were money hungry, were bribed by some of those who were in the tower, and on receiving 20,000 drachmas, let some of them slip away. When word of what had happened came to Maccabeus, he gathered the leaders of the people and accused these men of having sold their brethren for money by setting their enemies free to fight against them. Then he slew these men who had turned traitor and immediately captured the two towers. Having success at arms in everything he undertook, he destroyed more than 20,000 in the two strongholds. Judas defeats Timothy. Now, Timothy, who had been defeated by the Jews before gathering a tremendous force of mercenaries and collected the cavalry from Asia in no smaller number, he came on, intending to take Judea by storm. As he drew near, Maccabeus and his men sprinkled dust upon their heads and girded their lions with sackcloths in supplication to God. Falling upon the steps before the altar, they besought him to be gracious to them and to be an enemy to their enemies and an adversary to their adversaries, as the Lord declares. And rising from their prayer, they took up their arms and advanced a considerable distance from the city. And when they came near to the enemy, they halted. Just as dawn was breaking, the two armies joined battle, the one having as pledge of success and victory not only their valor but their reliance upon the Lord, while the other made rage their leader in the fight. When the battle became fierce, there appeared to the enemy from heaven 5 resplendent men on horses with golden burdens, and they were leading the Jews. Surrounding Maccabeus and protecting him with their own armor and weapon, they kept him from being wounded, and they shot arrows and thunderbolts upon the enemy, so that, confused and blinded, they were thrown into disorder and cut to pieces. 20,500 were slaughtered, besides 600 horsemen. Timothy himself fled to a stronghold called Gazara, especially well garrisoned, where Cherias was commander. Then Maccabeus and his men were glad, and they besieged the fort for 4 days. The men within, relying on the strength of the place, blasphemed terribly and hurled out wicked words. But at dawn on the 5th day, 20 young men in the army of Maccabeus, fired with anger because of the blasphemies, bravely stormed the wall and with savage fury cut down every one they met. Others, who came up the same way, wheeled around against the defenders and set fire to the towers. They kindled fires and burned the blasphemers alive. Others broke open the gates and let in the rest of the force, and they occupied the city. They killed Timothy, who was hidden in a cistern, and his brother Charias and Apollophanes. When they had accomplished these things, with hymns and thanksgiving, they blessed the Lord, who shows great kindness to Israel and gives them the victory. 2 Maccabees chapter 11. Lysias besieges Betsaw. Very soon after this, Lysias, the king's guardian and kinsman, who was in charge of the government, being vexed at what had happened, gathered about 80,000 men and all his cavalry and came against the Jews. He intended to make the city a home for Greeks and to levy tribute on the temple as he did on the sacred places of the other nations, and to put up the high priesthood for sale every year. He took no account whatever of the power of God, but was elated with his 10,000s of infantry, and his thousands of cavalry, and his 80 elephants. Invading Judea, he approached Betsaw, which was a fortified place about 5 leagues from Jerusalem, and pressed it hard. When Maccabeus and his men got word that Lysias was besieging the strongholds, they all the people, with lamentations and tears, besought the Lord to send a good angel to save Israel. Maccabeus himself was the first to take up arms, and he urged the others to risk their lives with him to aid their brethren. Then they eagerly rushed off together, and there, while they were still near Jerusalem, a horseman appeared at their head, clothed in white and brandishing weapons of gold. And they all together praised the merciful God, and were strengthened in heart, ready to assail not only men, but the wildest beasts or walls of iron. They advanced in battle order, having their heavenly ally, for the Lord had mercy on them. They hurled themselves like lions against the enemy, and slew 11,000 of them, and 1,600 horsemen, and forced all the rest to flee. Most of them got away strapped and wounded, and Lysias himself escaped by disgraceful flight. And he was not without intelligence. He pondered over the defeat which had befallen him, and realized that the Hebrews were invincible because the mighty God fought on their side. So he sent to them and persuaded them to settle everything on just terms, promising that he would persuade the king, constraining him to be their friend. Maccabeus, having regard for the common good, agreed to all that Lysias urged, for the king granted every request in behalf of the Jews which Maccabeus delivered to Lysias in writing. Lysias makes peace with the Jews. The letter returned to the Jews by Lysias was to this effect: Lysias to the people of the Jews, greetings. John and Absalom, who were sent by you, have delivered your signed communication, and have asked about the matters indicated therein. I have informed the king of everything that needed to be brought before him, and he had agreed to what was possible. If you will maintain your good will towards the government, I will endeavor for the future to help promote your welfare. And concerning these matters and their detail, I have ordered these men and my representatives to confer with you. Farewell, the 148th year. Dios Corteus, 24th. The king's letter ran thus: King Antiochus, to his brother Lysias, greetings. Now that our father has gone on to the gods, we desire that the subject of the kingdom be undisturbed in caring for their own affairs. We have heard that the Jews do not consent to our father's change to Greek customs, but prefer their own way of living, and ask that their own customs be allowed them. Accordingly, since we choose that this nation also be free from disturbance, our decision is that their temple be restored to them, and that they live according to the customs of their ancestors. You will do well, therefore, to send word to them and give them pledges of friendship, so that they may know our policy and be of good cheer and go on happily in the conduct of their own will. To the nations, the king's letter was as follows: King Antiochus, to the Senate of the Jews and to the other Jews, greetings. If you are well, it is as we desire. We also are in good health. Menelaus has informed us that you wish to return home and look after your own affairs. Therefore, those who go home by the 30th day of Xanthicus, who have our pledge of friendship and full permission for the Jews to enjoy their own food and laws, just as formerly, and none of them shall be molested in any way for what he may have done in ignorance. And I have also sent Menelaus to encourage you. Farewell, the 148th year. Xanthicus, 15th. The Romans also sent them a letter which read thus: Quintus Memmius and Titus Manius, envoys of the Romans, to the people of the Jews, greeting. With regard to what Lysias, the kinsman of the king, has granted you, we also give consent. But as to the matters which he decided are to be referred to the king, as soon as you have considered them, send someone promptly, so that we may make proposals appropriate for you. For we are on our way to Antioch. Therefore, make haste and send some men, so that we may have your judgment. Farewell, the 148th year. Xanthicus, 15. 2 Maccabees, chapter 12. Incidents at Joppa and Jamnia. When this agreement had been reached, Lysias returned to the king, and the Jews went about their farming, But some of the governors in various places, Timothy and Apollonius, the son of Genesius, as well as Hieronymus and Demophon, and in addition to these, Nicanor, the governor of Cyprus, would not let them live quietly and in peace. And some men of Joppa did so ungodly a deed as this. They invited the Jews who lived among them to embark with their wives and children on boats which they had provided, as though they were no ill will to the Jews. And this was done by public vote of the city. And when they accepted, because they wished to live peaceably and suspended nothing, the men of Joppa took them out to sea and drowned them, not less than 200. When Judas heard of the cruelty visited on his countrymen, he gave orders to his men, and calling upon God, the righteous judge, attacked the murderers of his brethren. He set fire to the harbor by night and burned the boats, and masqueraded those who had taken refuge there. Then, because the city's gates were closed, he withdrew, intending to come again and root out the whole community of Joppa. But learning that the men in Jamnia meant in the same way to wipe out the Jews who were living among them, he attacked the people of Jamnia by night and set fire to the harbor and the fleet, so that the glow of the light was seen in Jerusalem, 30 miles distant. The campaign in Gilead. When they had gone more than a mile from there, on their march against Timothy, not less than 5,000 Arabs with 500 horsemen attacked them. After a hard fight, Judas and his men won the victory by the help of God. The defeated nomads besought Judas to grant them pledges of friendship, promising to give him cattle and to help his people in all other ways. Judas, thinking that they might really be useful in many ways, agreed to make peace with them, and after receiving his pledges, they departed to their tents. He also attacked a certain city which was strongly fortified with earthworks and walls and inhabited by all sorts of Gentiles. Its name was Caspin, and those who were within, relying on the strength of the walls and on their supply of provisions, behaved most insolently towards Judas and his men, railing at them and even blaspheming and saying unholy things. But Judas and his men, calling upon the great sovereign of the world, who, without battering rams or engines of war, overthrew Jericho in the days of Joshua, rushed furiously upon the walls. They took the city by the will of God and slaughtered untold numbers, so that the adjoining lake, a quarter of a mile wide, appeared to be running over with blood. Judas defeats Timothy's army. When they had gone 95 miles from there, they came to Charax, to the Jews who are called Taubiani. They did not find Timothy in that region, for he had by then departed from the region without accomplishing anything, though in one place he had left a very strong garrison. Dositheus and Sosipater, who was captains under Maccabees, marched out and destroyed those whom Timothy had left in the stronghold, more than 10,000 men. But Maccabeus arranged his army in divisions, set men in command of the divisions, and hastened after Timothy, who had with him 120,000 infantry and 2,500 cavalry. When Timothy learned of the approach of Judas, he sent off the women and the children, and also the baggage, to a place called Carnaim, for that place was hard to besiege and difficult of access because of the narrowness of all the approaches. But when Judas' first division appeared, terror and fear came over the enemy at the manifestation to them of him who sees all things. And they rushed off in flight and were swept on, this way and that, so that often they were injured by their own men and pierced by the points of their sword. And Judas pressed the pursuit with the utmost vigor, putting the sinners to the sword, and destroyed as many as 30 men. Timothy himself fell into the hands of Dositheus and Sosipater and their men. With great guile he besought them to let him go in safety, because he held the parents of most of them and the brothers of some, and no consideration would be shown them. And when, with many words, he had confirmed his solemn promise to restore them unharmed, they let him go for the sake of saving their brethren. Judas wins other victories. When Judas marched against Carnaim and the temple of Atargatis and slaughtered 25,000 people, after the rout and destruction of these, he marched also against Ephron, a fortified city where Lysias dwelt, with multitudes of people of all nationalities. Stalwart young men took their stand before the walls and made a vigorous defense, and great stores of war engines and missiles were there. But the Jews call upon the sovereign, who with power shatters the might of his enemies. And they got the city into their hands and killed as many as 25,000 of those who were in it. Setting out from there, they hastened to Scythopolis, which is 75 miles from Jerusalem. But when the Jews who dwelt there bore witness to the good will which the people of Scythopolis had shown them, and their kind treatment of them in times of misfortune, they thanked them and exhorted them to be well disposed to their race in the future also. Then they went up to Jerusalem as the Feast of Weeks was close at hand. Judas defeats Gorgias. After the feast called Pentecost, they hastened against Gorgias, the governor of Idumea, and he came out with 3,000 infantry and 400 cavalry. When they joined battle, it happened that a few of the Jews fell. But a certain Dositeus, one of Bassanor's men, who was on horseback and was a strong man, caught hold of Gorgias and, grasping his cloak, was dragging him off by main strength, wishing to take the accursed man alive, when one of the Tarasian horsemen bore down upon him and cut off his arm. So Gorgias escaped and reached Marisa, as Esdras and his men had been fighting for a long time and were weary. Judas called upon the Lord to show himself their ally and leader in the battle. In the language of their fathers, he raised the battle cry with hymns, and then he charged against Gorgias' men when they were not expecting it, and put them to flight. Prayer for those killed in battle. Then Judas assembled his army and went to the city of Adullam. As the 7th day was coming on, they purified themselves according to the custom, and they kept the Sabbath there. On the next day, as by that time it had become necessary, Judas and his men went to take up the bodies of the fallen and to bring them back to lie with their kinsmen in the sepulchres of their father. Then, under the tunic of every one of the dead, they found sacred tokens of the idols of Jamnia, which the law forbids the Jews to wear. And it became clear to all that his was why these men had fallen. So they all blessed the ways of the Lord, the righteous judge, who reveals the things that are hidden. And they turned to prayer, beseeching that the sin which has been committed might be wholly blotted out. And the noble Judas exhorted the people to keep themselves free from sin, for they had seen with their own eyes what had happened because of the sins of those who had fallen. He also took up a collection, man by man, to the amount of 2,000 drachmas of silver, and set it to Jerusalem to provide for a sin offering. In doing this, he acted very well and honorably, taking account of the resurrection. For if he were not expecting that those who had fallen would rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead. But if he was looking to the splendid reward that is laid up for those who fallen asleep in godliness, it was a holy and pious thought. Therefore, he made atonement for the dead, that they might be delivered from their sins.